Daniel pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway of the Riverside Music Academy. The wheel squeaked slightly against the polished marble floor. It was almost 8 in the evening, and most of the students had already gone home. This was his favorite time of day. The building became quiet, peaceful. Just him and the music that sometimes drifted from the practice rooms. He'd been working here for 3 years now. 3 years of mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms, and emptying trash cans. Some people might find it boring, but Daniel didn't mind. There was something special about this place. The walls seemed to breathe music. Even when the rooms were empty, he could almost hear the echoes of all the beautiful melodies that had been played here. Daniel stopped outside practice room 12. Through the small window in the door, he could see the black grand piano sitting in the center of the room. His chest tightened the way it always did when he looked at pianos. There was a time when he knew those keys better than anything else in the world, but that felt like a different lifetime now. He shook his head and kept moving. The main recital hall needed cleaning before he could go home tonight. As he approached the large double doors, he heard voices inside. Laughter, lots of it. He paused, wondering if he should come back later. But the schedule was tight and he still had 2 more floors to cover. Daniel pushed the door open quietly and slipped inside. A group of about 15 students had gathered near the stage. They were all dressed nicely, probably coming from some evening rehearsal or performance. At the center of the group stood a young woman in a dark blue dress. Even from a distance, Daniel recognized her. Everyone at the academy knew Victoria Chen. She was the star of the school. Her father was some famous conductor who traveled around the world. Her mother had been a concert pianist before she retired. Victoria had been playing since she was 4 years old, and according to the gossip Daniel overheard while cleaning, she'd already performed with 3 major orchestras. She was talented, beautiful, and she knew it. Daniel tried to stay near the back of the hall, working quietly. He started wiping down the seats in the last row, hoping nobody would notice him. "Come on, somebody play something worth listening to," Victoria's voice rang out across the hall. She was standing next to the large Steinway piano on stage, one hand resting on its polished surface. "I've been listening to mediocre playing all week. Surely one of you can surprise me." A tall boy with glasses climbed onto the stage. He sat at the piano and began playing something classical. Daniel recognized it as a Chopin piece. The boy wasn't bad. His technique was solid, his timing decent. But halfway through, Victoria held up her hand. "Stop, stop," she said, laughing. "That's so boring. You're playing the notes, but where's the feeling? Where's the passion?" The boy's face turned red. He got up quickly and rejoined the group. A few people patted his shoulder, but he looked crushed. Another student tried next. A girl with long black hair played something by Liszt. It was technically impressive, her fingers flying across the keys. But again, Victoria stopped her before she finished. "Too mechanical," Victoria declared. "You're playing like a robot." "Does anyone here actually understand music?" Daniel kept his head down, continuing to clean. He felt bad for the students. Victoria's words were harsh, even cruel. But he'd learned long ago not to get involved in things that weren't his business. He was just the janitor. Invisible, that's how he preferred it. "What about you?" Daniel looked up. Victoria was staring directly at him. The entire group had turned around to look at him too. "Me," Daniel said quietly. "Yes, you," Victoria said, walking down from the stage toward him. Her heels clicked against the floor with each step. "The janitor. Come play something for us." Several students started giggling. Daniel felt his face grow warm. "I'm sorry, miss. I'm just here to clean. I should probably come back later." "No, no," Victoria said, waving her hand dismissively. "I insist. Everyone else here has disappointed me tonight. Surely you can't do any worse than them." More laughter rippled through the group. Daniel gripped his mop tighter. He wanted to leave. Every instinct told him to just walk out of that hall and come back when they were gone. "What's wrong? Are you afraid?" Victoria's eyes sparkled with amusement. She was enjoying this. To her, this was just entertainment. A funny story she could tell her rich friends later. Then she said something that made everyone go quiet. "I'll tell you what," Victoria announced loudly, turning to address the whole group. "If the janitor can play something that impresses me, I'll marry him." The room exploded with laughter. Students were doubling over, clutching their stomachs. Someone pulled out their phone to record. Victoria stood there with her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face. She looked absolutely certain that she'd just made an impossible joke. Daniel looked at the piano on stage. Then he looked at Victoria. At her confident smile, at the way she stood there, so sure that he would either refuse or embarrass himself. So certain that someone in his position couldn't possibly have any real talent. Something shifted inside him. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something quieter than that. A door opening in a room he'd kept locked for a long time. He set his mop against the wall. "All right," Daniel said softly. The laughter started to fade. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. She probably expected him to back down, to make some excuse and scurry away, but Daniel was already walking toward the stage. His heart was pounding and his hands felt cold. It had been so long, years since he'd really played. What if his fingers didn't remember? What if he'd lost it completely? As he climbed the steps to the stage, one thought kept repeating in his mind. Maybe it's time to remember who I used to be. He reached the piano bench and sat down. The hall had gone completely silent. Daniel could feel everyone's eyes on him. He adjusted the bench slightly, just like he used to do. His fingers hovered over the keys. For just a moment, he was 20 years old again. Before everything changed, before the hospital bills and the late night shifts and the dreams that got folded up and put away, Daniel took a deep breath and placed his fingers on the keys. It was time to play. The piano keys felt cool under Daniel's fingertips. He closed his eyes for just a second, letting himself remember. How many hours had he spent at a piano just like this one? 10,000? 20,000? His old teacher used to say that the piano wasn't just an instrument. It was a language. And Daniel had once been fluent. He opened his eyes and began to play. The first notes rang out clear and strong. He'd chosen Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. It was a bold choice. A dangerous choice. This piece didn't forgive mistakes. It demanded everything from the player. Power, precision, emotion. Most pianists spent years working up to it. The opening chords crashed through the recital hall like thunder, deep and dark and full of something that words couldn't quite capture. Behind him, Daniel heard someone gasp. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop now. His fingers moved across the keys, following patterns they'd learned so long ago. Patterns they hadn't forgotten. The muscle memory was still there, buried under years of pushing mop buckets and scrubbing floors, but still there. His left hand rumbled through the bass notes while his right hand sang out the melody. The sound filled every corner of the hall. It wrapped around the marble columns and soared up to the high ceiling. Daniel let the music take over. He forgot about Victoria standing somewhere behind him with her arms crossed. He forgot about the students who'd been laughing just minutes ago. He forgot about his cleaning cart waiting in the back of the hall. For the first time in years, there was only the music. The piece moved through its dark, brooding middle section. Daniel's hands flew across the keys, striking each note with perfect timing. His body swayed slightly with the rhythm, the way it always had when he played. This wasn't just technical skill. This was something deeper. This was a conversation between the player and the instrument. A conversation Daniel had missed more than he'd let himself admit. As the music built toward its climax, Daniel felt something wet on his cheek. Was he crying? He didn't have time to think about it. The final phrases were coming. The big dramatic conclusion that made this piece so powerful. His hands crashed down on the keys one last time, and then it was over. The last notes faded into silence. Daniel sat still on the bench, his hands resting on the keys. His heart was racing. He felt exhausted and alive at the same time. Slowly, he turned around to face the audience. The students were staring at him with their mouths open. Nobody was laughing now. Nobody was even smiling. They looked shocked, stunned, like they'd just witnessed something impossible. Then one person started clapping, a boy near the front. Then another person joined in. And another. Within seconds, the entire group was applauding. Some were even cheering, all except Victoria. She stood frozen in the same spot where she'd been standing before. Her face had gone completely pale. The confident smirk was gone. In its place was something Daniel hadn't expected to see. Fear and confusion, and maybe, just maybe, a tiny bit of respect. Daniel stood up from the piano bench. He walked down the stage steps, his legs feeling shaky. The applause continued as he moved through the crowd. Students stepped aside to let him pass, staring at him like they were seeing him for the first time. He stopped when he reached Victoria. She was still staring at him, her mouth slightly open. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. Daniel Park, he said quietly. I work here. I clean the practice rooms on the second floor and the recital halls on the first floor. Monday through Friday, 6 to midnight. No, Victoria shook her head. I mean, who are you really? Where did you learn to play like that? Daniel picked up his mop from where he'd left it against the wall. Part of him wanted to just walk away, to let the mystery stand, but these kids deserved the truth, especially after the way Victoria had treated them tonight. I studied at Juilliard, he said simply. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Several students pulled out their phones immediately, fingers flying across screens. Wait, Juilliard? A girl with red hair said. Like the actual Juilliard school in New York? Daniel nodded. I found him, a boy shouted, holding up his phone. Daniel Park. He won the international piano competition in Brussels when he was 19. And he performed at Carnegie Hall, twice. The boy looked up from his phone, his eyes wide. You're actually famous. Was famous, Daniel corrected gently. That was a long time ago. Victoria's hand had moved to her throat. She looked like she might be sick. But why are you working here as a janitor? What happened? Daniel was quiet for a moment. This was the part of the story he usually didn't tell. The part that still hurt to talk about. But something about tonight made him want to be honest. My mom got sick, he said. Cancer, stage 4. The medical bills started piling up fast. My dad had passed away years before, so it was just me and her. I was in my 3rd year at Juilliard when we got the diagnosis. The students had gone completely silent now. Even the ones who'd been on their phones had stopped scrolling. I took a leave of absence from school to take care of her. Daniel continued. We thought it would just be for a semester, maybe a year, but the cancer was aggressive. She needed someone with her all the time, driving her to treatments, helping her when she was too weak to get out of bed, making sure she took her medications. He paused, his throat tight. I found work cleaning offices at night so I could be with her during the day. The hours were flexible and it paid enough to help with the bills. I kept telling myself I'd go back to piano after she got better. But she didn't get better, Victoria said softly. Daniel shook his head. She fought hard for 3 years. But no, she didn't get better. She passed away last spring. I'm so sorry, someone in the crowd murmured. Others nodded in agreement. After she died, I guess I just didn't know what to do with myself, Daniel admitted. Going back to Juilliard felt impossible. Too much time had passed. Too much had changed. So I kept working. I moved here to this city for a fresh start and found this job at the academy. The pay is decent, and being around music again, even just hearing it through the walls, it felt right somehow. Victoria's eyes were shining with tears. I had no idea. It's okay, Daniel said, even though it wasn't really okay. You didn't know? No, Victoria said firmly. It's not okay. What I did tonight was cruel. Not just to you, but to everyone here. I've been acting like I'm so much better than everyone else just because I was born into a musical family. But you, she gestured helplessly toward the stage. You have more talent in one finger than I'll have in my entire life. Daniel shook his head. That's not true. You're an incredible pianist. I've heard you practicing sometimes when I'm cleaning. But I'm a terrible person, Victoria said, her voice cracking. The silence in the hall was heavy now. Everyone was watching this moment unfold, but nobody seemed to know what to say. Finally, Daniel smiled. It was a small, sad smile. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after. He picked up his cleaning cart and started pushing it toward the door. He'd already been here too long. He still had 2 floors to clean before midnight. As he reached the exit, Victoria called out behind him. Daniel, wait. He turned around. Thank you, she said, for playing, and for being kind when I didn't deserve it. Daniel nodded once and then left the hall. Behind him, he could hear the students starting to talk again, their voices hushed and serious. But he kept walking, pushing his cart down the empty hallway, the sound of the wheels squeaking against the floor. In his chest, something felt different, lighter maybe, or perhaps just awakened after a long sleep. His fingers still tingled from touching the keys. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel let himself wonder if maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to find his way back to the music he'd left behind. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his small apartment staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. His fingers kept twitching, remembering the feel of the piano keys, It had been like waking up after a long, dreamless sleep. Every note had felt right, natural, like coming home after years away. But morning came anyway, the way it always did. His alarm went off at noon. He had the day shift today, filling in for another janitor who'd called in sick. Daniel dragged himself out of bed, made instant coffee, and caught the bus to the academy. When he arrived at the building, something felt different. As he walked through the main entrance, a group of students stopped talking and stared at him. One girl whispered something to her friend. They both looked at him with wide eyes, then quickly looked away when he made eye contact. Daniel frowned and kept walking. Maybe he was imagining things. He headed to the supply closet to grab his cart and cleaning supplies. "Hey, are you the janitor who played last night?" Daniel turned around. A young guy with curly hair and a violin case was standing behind him, practically bouncing with excitement. Yes," Daniel said. "Dude, that's incredible. I'm in the violin program here and I heard what happened. The video already has like 15,000 views." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What video?" The guy pulled out his phone and turned it toward Daniel. There on the screen was a video of him sitting at the piano playing Rachmaninoff. The camera was shaky, obviously recorded on someone's phone, but the audio was clear. Crystal clear. You could hear every note. "Someone posted it last night," the guy explained. "It's all over the academy's social media. Everyone's talking about it." Daniel felt dizzy. He'd spent 3 years trying to be invisible, and now there was a video of him playing piano spreading across the internet. "I need to get to work," he mumbled, pushing his cart away. But everywhere he went that day it was the same. Students stopping to stare. Whispered conversations that stopped when he got close. By the time his lunch break came around, Daniel felt exhausted and he'd barely done any actual cleaning. He found a quiet bench outside behind the building and sat down with his sandwich. Finally, some peace. He closed his eyes and tilted his face toward the sun. "Mind if I sit?" Daniel opened his eyes. Victoria was standing there holding a paper bag from the cafe down the street. She looked different today, less polished. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of one of her usual designer outfits. "It's a free country," Daniel said. Not unkindly. Victoria sat down, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a minute, neither of them spoke. She pulled a muffin from her bag and picked at it nervously. "I talked to Dean Robertson this morning," she finally said. Daniel took a bite of his sandwich and waited. "I told him what happened last night, about the bet I made, about how horrible I was." Victoria's voice was quiet. "He wasn't happy with me. He said I'd embarrassed the academy and disrespected you." "He's right." "Okay," Daniel said. "But I also told him about your background, about Juilliard and Carnegie Hall and everything." Victoria turned to look at him. "Daniel, you shouldn't be cleaning floors. You should be teaching." Daniel shook his head. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm fine where I am." "The academy has an opening," Victoria pressed on. "Professor Kim is retiring at the end of the semester. They need someone to take over his advanced piano students. The dean said if you're interested, the job is yours. They'll work around your lack of a completed degree. Your performance history speaks for itself." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Teaching. He'd dreamed about that once, back when he thought his life would go differently. "What's the pay?" Victoria told him. It was more than double what he made cleaning. Not enough to be rich, but enough to actually save some money. Enough to maybe have a life beyond just surviving. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel asked. "Because I owe you," Victoria said simply. "And because it's the right thing to do. You have a gift, Daniel. Hiding it away while you mop floors is just wrong." Daniel crumpled up his sandwich wrapper. "I'll think about it. That's all I ask." Victoria stood up to leave, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Why did you stop playing? I mean, I know you had to take care of your mom. But after she passed, why didn't you go back to it?" Daniel looked out at the empty courtyard. It was a question he'd asked himself 1,000 times. Fear, I guess. When you step away from something for that long, going back feels impossible. What if I wasn't good anymore? What if all that time away had broken something? It felt safer to just not try. Victoria nodded slowly. "I think I understand. But Daniel, you played last night. And you were brilliant. Whatever you were afraid of, it didn't happen." After she left, Daniel sat alone for a while longer. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from a number he didn't recognize. He opened it. It was a link to the video, already 23,000 views now. Daniel watched it, seeing himself through a stranger's eyes. The comments were flowing in. "Who is this guy? This is the best playing I've heard in years. The janitor has more talent than the entire school." One comment made him pause. It was from someone named Helen Yu. "I was his teacher at Juilliard. Daniel, if you ever see this, please call me. We've all been wondering what happened to you." Daniel stared at that comment for a long time. His old teacher. She remembered him. She'd been wondering about him. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. Daniel cleaned on autopilot, his mind elsewhere. By the time he clocked out at 8, he'd made a decision. He found Dean Robertson's office on the 3rd floor. The dean was still there, working late, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed papers. Daniel knocked on the open door. "Sir, do you have a minute?" The dean looked up and smiled. "Daniel, yes, please come in. Victoria told me she spoke with you." Daniel stepped inside, his heart pounding. "About that teaching position. If it's still available, I'd like to accept." The dean's smile widened. "That's wonderful news. Truly wonderful. Though I have to ask, what changed your mind?" Daniel thought about his mom. About the promise he'd made to her in the hospital, 3 days before she died. She'd been so weak, could barely speak. But she'd gripped his hand and whispered, "Don't let my sickness kill your music too. Promise me, Daniel. Promise you'll play again," he'd promised. But he hadn't kept that promise. Not until last night. "I think I'm ready to stop being afraid," Daniel said. The dean nodded. "Fear is a powerful thing, but so is courage. And it takes courage to start over." He pulled out a folder from his drawer. "I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. You'll start after the winter break. That gives you a few weeks to prepare." Daniel shook his hand and left the office. As he walked down the hall, he felt lighter than he had in years. Scared, yes. Uncertain, absolutely. But also excited. For the first time since his mom died, he felt like he had a purpose again. He was passing the recital hall when he heard music. Someone was practicing inside. Daniel stopped and listened. It was Victoria. He recognized her playing. She was working on something by Beethoven, one of the later sonatas. But something was different about the way she played. The technical brilliance was still there, but now there was something else too. A softness, a vulnerability. She was playing with her heart, not just her fingers. Daniel stood outside the door and listened until she finished. When the last notes faded, he quietly continued down the hall, a small smile on his face. Maybe this was going to work out after all. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. For the first time in 3 years, he had somewhere to be. Someone to call. He found his old teacher's number online and stared at it for 10 minutes before finally pressing dial. The phone rang 3 times. Then a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Professor Yu? This is Daniel Park. I saw your comment on a video and I thought maybe it was time I called." There was a pause. Then he heard his old teacher's voice crack with emotion. "Daniel, oh my God, Daniel. I've been hoping you'd reach out for years, talk to me, tell me everything." And for the first time since his mom got sick, Daniel did. He told the whole story. And with every word, he felt the weight he'd been carrying start to lift. A new chapter was beginning. The first day of teaching arrived faster than Daniel expected. He stood outside classroom 301, holding a worn leather folder that had belonged to his mother. Inside were pages of sheet music, teaching notes, and a photo of him at his Juilliard graduation. His hands were sweating. Through the door's small window, he could see 8 students already seated. His students now. They were talking among themselves, probably wondering what their new teacher would be like. Daniel recognized a few faces from that night in the recital hall. He took a deep breath and walked in. The room went quiet immediately. 8 pairs of eyes locked onto him. Daniel set his folder on the piano and turned to face them. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Daniel Park, and I'll be your instructor for advanced piano this semester." A girl in the front row raised her hand. "Is it true you learned everything at Juilliard?" Daniel smiled. "I learned a lot there, yes, but honestly, I learned just as much from making mistakes and practicing in my bedroom for hours when I was your age. Juilliard just gave me structure and pushed me harder." "And you really played at Carnegie Hall?" a boy in the back asked. "Twice," Daniel admitted. "Once when I was 19 and again at 21. Both times I was terrified I'd mess up in front of hundreds of people." The students laughed, and Daniel felt some of his nervousness fade. These were just kids who loved music same as he'd been. Here's what I want you to know, Daniel said, sitting on the edge of the desk. I'm not here to make you play like me. I'm here to help you find your own voice at the piano. Yes, technique matters. Yes, you need to know the theory. But music isn't about playing perfect notes. It's about communicating something real. Over the next hour, Daniel listened to each student play. Some were technically brilliant but emotionally flat. Others played with passion but sloppy timing. One girl, quiet and nervous, played with such raw feeling that Daniel felt his throat tighten. She reminded him of himself at that age. When class ended, the students filed out, chattering excitedly. Daniel packed up his folder, feeling drained but satisfied. Maybe he could actually do this. How'd it go? Daniel looked up. Victoria was leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed but her expression genuinely curious. Better than I expected, Daniel admitted. I didn't freeze up or forget what to say. I listened from the hallway, Victoria said. You're a natural teacher. The way you explained phrasing to that boy struggling with Chopin, I've never heard anyone explain it that clearly. Daniel felt his face warm. Thanks. That means a lot. Victoria walked into the room and sat at one of the student desks. Can I ask you something? And please be honest, okay? Do you hate me? Her voice was small, vulnerable. For what I did that night? I know I apologized, but I was so cruel. If you hate me, I'd understand. Daniel sat down at the piano bench and thought about her question. I don't hate you, he said finally. I was angry at first, humiliated. But then I realized something. If you hadn't pushed me that night, I might never have played again. Sometimes we need someone to challenge us, even if they do it for the wrong reasons. That's way more grace than I deserve, Victoria said quietly. Maybe, Daniel agreed. But carrying hate around is exhausting. I've been tired for 3 years. I don't want to be tired anymore. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria stood up. I have a proposal. A real one this time, not a cruel joke. Daniel raised an eyebrow. The Academy's winter concert is in 6 weeks, Victoria explained. It's the biggest event of the year. Parents, donors, press, everyone comes. I'm supposed to perform a solo piece, but I was thinking, what if we played a duet instead? Daniel blinked. You want to perform with me? I know it's a lot to ask. You've only just started teaching, and performing again might feel like too much pressure. Victoria rushed on. But I keep thinking about how you played that night. And I've been trying to play with more feeling like you do, less like a machine. I think I could learn something from working with you. We both could learn from each other. Daniel's first instinct was to say no. Performing meant pressure, expectations, the possibility of failure. But then he remembered what he'd told his students that morning. Music is about communicating something real. What piece? He asked. Victoria's face lit up. I was thinking the Brahms Hungarian Dance No. 5 arrangement for 4 hands. It's challenging, but not impossible. And it's fun. When was the last time you played something just because it was fun? Daniel couldn't remember. All right, he heard himself say. Let's do it. They scheduled practice sessions for Tuesday and Thursday evenings after classes ended. The first rehearsal was awkward. Victoria kept apologizing every time she made a mistake. Daniel had to keep reminding her that mistakes were part of the process. You're thinking too much, he said during their second session. Feel the rhythm. We're not 2 separate players. We're 1 instrument with 4 hands. Easy for you to say, Victoria muttered. You make it look effortless. It's not effortless, Daniel said. Look at my hands, he held them up. They were shaking slightly. I'm nervous every time I play. The trick is playing through the nervousness. Something shifted after that conversation. Victoria stopped being so careful, so afraid of judgment. They began to play together, really together. Their hands would cross at certain points in the piece, and they developed a rhythm, an unspoken communication. When Victoria rushed a section, Daniel would ground her with steady bass notes. When Daniel got too serious, Victoria would inject playfulness into her melody. Word spread through the academy that they were rehearsing together. Students would find excuses to walk past the practice room, trying to catch glimpses through the small window. The video of Daniel's Rachmaninoff performance had reached over 100,000 views now. People were calling him the janitor pianist online, and while Daniel found it a bit embarrassing, he couldn't deny it felt good to be recognized for his music again. 3 weeks before the concert, Professor Yu called him. His old teacher had been following his story online. I'm proud of you, Daniel, she said. Not just for playing again, but for teaching. That's where your real gift might be. You understand what it means to struggle. I'm still figuring it out, Daniel admitted. Some days I feel like a fraud. Like someone's going to realize I don't belong here. That's called imposter syndrome, Professor Yu laughed. Every good teacher feels it. It means you care about doing it right. The ones who think they know everything, those are the bad teachers. After they hung up, Daniel sat in his small apartment and looked at his hands. These hands had cleaned toilets and mopped floors. They'd held his mother's hand as she took her last breath. They'd been idle for years, forgotten. But now they were teaching students and playing music again. The night before the concert, Daniel couldn't sleep. He got up at 2 in the morning and took a walk through the empty city streets. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. You awake? I'm freaking out. Daniel smiled and called her. What's wrong? What if I mess up tomorrow? Victoria's voice was tight with anxiety. What if I let you down in front of everyone? Then we'll mess up together, Daniel said. Victoria, nobody's perfect. We'll play our best and whatever happens, happens. The music is what matters, not perfection. There was a pause. When did you get so wise? When I spent 3 years scrubbing floors and had nothing but time to think, Daniel said. Victoria laughed and Daniel could hear the tension leave her voice. Thank you for giving me a chance after everything. Thank you for the same, Daniel said. Now get some sleep. We have a concert tomorrow. He hung up and looked at the sky. Dawn was still hours away, but Daniel could already feel something changing. Tomorrow, he would step onto that stage not as a janitor pretending to be a pianist, but as a teacher and musician who'd found his way back home. The journey had been long and painful, but maybe that was the point. Maybe you had to lose yourself completely before you could find out who you really were. Daniel walked back to his apartment, his footsteps echoing in the quiet streets, and for the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. The recital hall was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the back, cameras set up in the corners. Daniel peeked through the stage curtain and felt his stomach flip. He'd performed for crowds before, but that was a different lifetime. Back then, he'd been confident, fearless. Now he was just a guy who'd spent the last 3 years pushing a mop, about to play in front of hundreds of people. Stop looking, Victoria whispered beside him. She was wearing an elegant black dress, her hair swept up. You're making yourself more nervous. Too late, Daniel muttered. His hands felt cold and sweaty at the same time. Victoria grabbed his hand and squeezed it. Hey, look at me. Daniel turned to face her. We practiced this 100 times, she said firmly. We know this piece inside and out. And you know what? Even if we mess up, it'll be okay. Nobody out there has walked the path you've walked. Nobody out there has earned this moment more than you have. Daniel took a deep breath. When did you become the wise one? I had a good teacher, Victoria smiled. The curtain began to rise. The audience noise faded to silence. Daniel and Victoria walked onto the stage together and sat at the piano bench, adjusting their positions. The Steinway Grand sat under the bright stage lights, its black surface gleaming. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He looked out at the crowd and spotted some of his students in the 3rd row, giving him thumbs up. Dean Robertson sat in the front with a proud smile. And there, near the back, he saw someone who made his breath catch. Professor Yu, his old teacher, had actually come. Victoria's elbow gently nudged his. Time to begin. They placed their hands on the keys together. For just a second, Daniel closed his eyes. He thought about his mom, about the hospital room where she'd made him promise to keep playing, about the 3 years of silence that followed, about that night in this very hall when a cruel challenge had changed everything. Then he opened his eyes and began to play. The Brahms Hungarian dance started with Victoria's melody dancing across the high notes while Daniel provided the foundation in the bass. Right away, Daniel felt it. That connection they'd built over weeks of practice. They weren't thinking anymore. They were just playing. His hands crossed over Victoria's as the piece called for it, their movements synchronized perfectly. When the music called for power, they both leaned into it. When it needed delicacy, their touch softened together. It was like breathing in rhythm with another person. Natural. Right. Daniel felt himself smile as they moved through the playful middle section. This was why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. Not for the prestige or the performances or the recognition, but for this feeling, this pure joy of creating something beautiful with sound. Victoria glanced at him and smiled too. Her earlier nervousness had vanished. She was having fun, really having fun, maybe for the first time in her life. Not performing to impress anyone or prove anything, just playing because the music made her happy. The piece built toward its dramatic finale. Their hands flew across the keys, the tempo increasing, the volume swelling. The hall filled with sound, and then with one final triumphant chord, it was over, for a heartbeat silence. Then the audience erupted. People were on their feet, applauding and cheering. Daniel and Victoria stood and bowed, both of them slightly breathless and grinning. As the applause continued, Daniel looked at Victoria and saw tears streaming down her face. Happy tears. They walked off stage together, and the moment they were behind the curtain, Victoria hugged him. "We did it. Oh my God, we actually did it. You were amazing," Daniel said. "We were amazing," Victoria corrected. The next hour was a blur, people crowding around to congratulate them, students asking for advice, parents thanking Daniel for inspiring their children, Dean Robertson shaking his hand enthusiastically and talking about future performances. Then Professor Yu appeared through the crowd. She looked older than Daniel remembered, her hair more gray, but her eyes were the same. "Sharp and kind at once, Professor," Daniel said, his voice cracking slightly. She pulled him into a tight hug. "I knew you'd find your way back," she whispered. "I always knew." They talked for 20 minutes, catching up on lost years. Professor Yu told him about other students she'd taught, performances she'd attended. Daniel told her about his mom, about the cleaning jobs, about how lost he'd felt. "You know what I think?" Professor Yu said. "I think everything happened exactly as it needed to. You learned something during those 3 years that you never would have learned at Juilliard. You learned empathy, humility, real struggle. That's in your playing now. And it's in your teaching. Your students are lucky to have you." After she left, Daniel found a quiet corner backstage and sat down. He felt exhausted but alive. Completely, fully alive. "There you are." Victoria appeared carrying 2 bottles of water. She handed him one and sat beside him. "Hiding from your fans?" "Just needed a minute," Daniel admitted. "That was intense." "It was perfect," Victoria said. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "I've been thinking about what I said that night. About the marriage thing." Daniel tensed. "Victoria, you don't need to—" "Let me finish," she interrupted gently. "That was the most arrogant, cruel thing I've ever done. I thought I was so superior to everyone. But here's the thing. These past few weeks, working with you, learning from you, I've changed. You changed me. You changed yourself," Daniel corrected. "I just played some piano." Victoria shook her head. "No, you showed me what real musicianship looks like. What real kindness looks like. My whole life, people have told me I'm talented, but you're the first person who made me want to be a better human being, not just a better pianist." She stood up and held out her hand. "So I want to make a new promise. Not as a joke this time. A real one." Daniel looked at her hand. "What kind of promise?" "That we'll keep playing together. Not because of some stupid bet, but because we make each other better. As musicians and as people." Victoria's eyes were serious. "Deal." Daniel smiled and shook her hand. "Deal." The winter concert became the talk of the Academy for weeks. The video of their performance got even more views than Daniel's original Rachmaninoff. News outlets picked up the story of the janitor who became a teacher. Someone even wrote an article calling it the most inspiring performance of the year. But for Daniel, the real reward was smaller and quieter. It was his student, the shy girl who played with so much feeling, finally raising her hand in class to share her interpretation of a piece. It was another teacher asking his advice about a struggling student. It was Victoria texting him a funny meme about piano practice. It was the feeling of walking into the academy each morning and knowing he belonged there. Not as the janitor, not as the viral video guy, but as Professor Park, a teacher, a musician, someone who'd lost everything and found himself again.